Thanks so much for watching our show. We really appreciate the support. It costs a lot to produce, so we're asking for donations and pledges here on Patreon. Thanks again. Is there any distinctions, in your opinion, from the people that you've coached, and I'm just going to give it sort of an arbitrary, people in the top 20 in the world versus top 100 in the world versus top 500 or something. Break down some of those distinctions that you've seen that separates given similar sort of genetic ability, because my experience is you have to have the it as an athlete, and the it is, partially genetic, and then partially, there are other factors there, mental and emotional and spiritual, right? So, take me through that, your perspective there.
Yeah. So, let's just to kind of break it down a little bit into its components. Let's just, for argument's sake, assume the physical and strategical abilities are equal of 2 or 5 or 10 given athletes. Then it's kind of obvious that the reason why somebody will perform better or worse is because of their mental abilities, right? Mm-hmm. So by those abilities, basically, your ability to pay attention to what matters in the moment for whatever duration of time, your ability to track details in real time. So really being able to notice, very subtle sensations in the body, or changes that you're visually able to pick up on your opponent, what they're doing, and your ability to allow pleasant and unpleasant experiences to come and go without trying to suppress or avoid the ones that aren't pleasant, and without trying to cling to the ones that are pleasant.
Yeah, that's really well said. The last one just reminds me of all the mindfulness practice that you've clearly done in your lifetime.
Yeah. So those 3 skills in combination actually is what we define as mindfulness. So to put those 3 skills in short, just put words on them, it would be concentration, clarity, and coolness. There's many, many other words for that,
Yeah.
But the words are like kind of secondary. The skills really are kind of what matters.
Yeah,
so if you took that lens and you look at somebody like Nadal, just as an example, it's very apparent that if you look at his performance and his behavior over many matches, that he has those skills further developed than most other athletes. It's kind of like you can see it. You can see how far developed his ability to deal with difficulties is in unpleasant situations, when he's fatigued, when he is down 2 sets, when he is not playing so well. The way he's dealing with that is very different than from an athlete, let's say, like Kyrgios, who by no means is physically any inferior to Nadal. His physical abilities are off the charts. It's insanity. But because he is so reactive to something, if something is really good, something great happens, you can see it. He's like, he's like, yes, and it's celebrating. But that also goes into the other direction, right?
Totally.
So if something is not going well, he completely loses it.
Totally.
So the ability to allow pleasant and unpleasant experiences equally, not so far developed in his case.
Now,
right?
Christian, how hardwired do you think that is? When I say hardwired, I'm talking not just genetics, but that early environmental conditioning to age 10, 11, 12, right? Sort of sets people in certain directions. And it's not that obviously you're doing a phenomenal job of helping people grow, evolve, and change, but some of what you're discussing is partially hardwired.
Yeah. That's a good question. This really is just my opinion. I have not discussed that a lot with people who are studying that, nor have I read a lot of studies on that. Okay, so just as a upfront. But out of my experience, what I have noticed with athletes that I've worked with, so You know, I have had the kind of fortunate situation that there's athletes that I kind of coach and like share their journey for many years. So
Yeah.
you're a coach, you know what kind of the half-life is of a coach-athlete relationship. And in my case, I have currently right now, half of all of my clients are with me for 10 years.
Awesome.
So
Love
to be
it. Love
able
it, Christian.
to see, you know, the changes over 10 years is very different than if you're with somebody for half a year to even 4 years.
In yourself as well.
Yes, exactly. So and then some of the people that I work with, I started working with when they were in their mid-20s, in their 30s, and the 40s. Others I've started working with when they were 7, or 10. So the change from a kid from 10 to now 20 going to college, that is so much change. It's really like it's one of the greatest joys in my life to be able to be with another human being and witness that, how they can develop, and giving them some kind of information. And that's not just intellectual information, also sharing experiences with them that might be beneficial for them for their future, how they develop. So this is kind of going where, you know, what you just asked.
Yeah, no,
so,
it's phenomenal. That part of your journey is phenomenal because I experienced that as well. Phenomenal, Christian. But yeah, so coming back to that, you know, trying to answer that hardwiring question, you know, you've seen a lot here, you've experienced a lot, you've been part of these athletes' lives. What are your thoughts?
So it's exact kind of this, let's say, hardwired. Let's leave out the genetics. Okay, I really don't know anything about genetics. But when it comes to what are you exposed to, who are the people in your life that have an influence on you, and what is what environment are you in that is influencing you? So I can give an example with 2 kids actually. And they are quite different from one another. One of the kids was that both of them I'm coaching for 10 years. And one of them is kind of wants to become a pro, possibly, but definitely do college, and is trying hard, and was for 10 years doing everything that I have ever said. Okay. He was not like from the first moment on somebody who's like going over and out in terms of how hard they try and they do more than everybody else, like a, you know, like a Nadal or a LeBron James or somebody. You have like those kind of people who from early onset, they just like are laser focused, and that's what they want. It's their intrinsic motivation is just so off the charts that like there's almost no way they're not going to make it.
For sure.
Because they have the it, and then they have this, and you're like, okay, you're kind of set if you don't get unlucky, right?
Right.
So he was not that, but he was very interested in just taking in this information, and no resistance really, what we were talking about early on, towards like working on this, developing that, whether it was physical or mental or strategical or whatever it was. And he has developed, and being from somebody who was really not that good as a little kid, where I would not necessarily have said he will be able to go pro. But I mean, college, if you start at a young age, anybody can make, really, if you put in the time, right? And now he got a scholarship, and he has a good shot at going pro. To the other kid, who's a little younger, who was playing tennis, but had no interest at all in anything else, didn't want to do work outside of the court, didn't want to do any mental performance training, was not interested in doing any strategical work. Just playing tennis for fun, but very talented when it comes to that. But so I never pushed it, right? When we're again kind of making full circle, it's like it doesn't matter if I want more, if I can see the possibilities that this kid has for the future, it doesn't matter if they won't want it. But now for 5, 6, 7, no, not actually, it's 10 years that other kid has been exposed to this kid and me without pushing it, and developing and seeing how that other kid is changing with all the work that they're putting in, and seeing that they don't have to do it. They can do it if they want. And now 10 years in, that other kid is 14 now. Okay. So we started when he was 4.
Wow.
Is better than the other kid who is now 19, when he was 14, because I was with him for 10 years both, right? So flipping back, even though that younger kid was much
More
put less
resistant.
work in,
Yeah,
is
more
better
resistant,
at the
yeah.
same age than the kid that put more work in.
Yeah.
And has these, is kind of using these abilities to be equanimous, to be compassionate, to try hard, but it was much less of a intellectual teaching, a theoretical teaching, and he learned it by seeing it, by having us as examples and really seeing how it works. He didn't have to understand it. He didn't have to believe it because we said it, that it's good for him. He saw it in real time developing over years, and now it's just doing it too.
Fantastic. To his credit, he stayed with you, which is phenomenal as well. But let's come back to the Nick Kyrgios, example, because I think it's potentially a fascinating one. If you were to get him today, could you, with all that physical ability, because I've seen him play at times where, he was just completely unbeatable. His serve is so ludicrous that, when his head is in it, I mean, the guy is just like ridiculous. And so if you were to take him today, I don't know, is he 25? I don't know how old he is, but if you were to get in there today, could you help him become a Federer, Nadal, Djokovic type, or is it that hard wiring, is it a little bit late at 25 or 20? You know what I mean? So that was really what I was trying to get at. I was just curious, it's pure curiosity on my part, and I know you have the experience.
I would answer it in the way that I think definitely he can develop these skills, these mental skills, to be more to be cooler with challenging situations and to pay more attention to what matters. That we know scientifically that is possible. You can develop those skills to degrees where you think it's almost impossible. It's hard to even imagine how far you can develop these skills until you have kind of have them at a certain level. But it will only happen if you want it. And he, as far as anything I have seen from him, is he doesn't want it. And it's nobody's place.
Let's just say today he started working with you and he changed his mind and he wanted it. Could you turn him into, with all this physical ability that's arguably as great as the top three here, right? Could you turn him into one of those top three?
I mean, he could turn himself into one of the top three. I could not do it, obviously. He could do it.
Well, could you help? I mean, excuse my language. Yeah. So could you help him become like
for sure.
Okay.
For sure. That is like no. Well, then if I would say no to this, I would kind of go against what the scientific evidence is suggesting over the past decade, really. It's not, but the big differentiator, I think, for everybody listening is like, does he want it or not? Because he will not be able to do this, and nobody can help him if he doesn't want it. So, and what is this wanting? Is just the intrinsic motivation, the desire to do it. If there's so much aversion for him to put in the time, and like there's so much desire and craving for doing things that are irrelevant to tennis or even detrimental to tennis, that switch will not happen. That has to come from within. He has to want it, and wanting it is not just in the mind, it's also feeling that motivation. And
it's also, though, sometimes it can get a little deep, right, Christian? Because sometimes people can say they want it, right? And then there's things like self-sabotage and deserving that are running underneath, right? So let's just say he changes his mind and he wants it, he starts working with you, and then you start to realize that as much as he seems to want it consciously, there's some other processes running underneath in the background, like, deserving. Does he really deserve it? You know what I mean? Does Serena deserve to be the best ever, right? To actually win that next match. She got to a place where she stopped winning even though she was probably better, right? And that seemed to me more psychological and emotional than it was, it wasn't physical, right? It seemed to me like, do we deserve, even Tiger Woods, right? Like, how much does he deserve, right? Because he seems to, he never, he obviously had the ability to go way beyond Jack Nicklaus, right? But many times in his life, he did things that sabotaged it, right? So
Yes.
do you address this sort of deeper psychological principles around self-sabotage and deserving in your processes of teaching mindfulness and bringing, the full experience to the game with your clients?
Well, I mean, if it really would go into the therapeutic and psychological realm deeper, then I would partner with a psychologist, because I'm not a psychologist. Of course, there's a gray area with certain things that you discuss, but I specialize in developing the skills that allow you to deal with, are you deserving or not, and not with the intellectual reframing of like, where does I am not deserving this actually come from. Through the mindfulness practice, that might unravel over time, and that is not uncommon. And it's not a bad idea to pair these two things. So you have mindfulness-based psychotherapy, is really on the rise because of that. But I really would not go very deep into that intellectual aspect of what you're talking about and discussing that.
I would call that an emotional, not an intellectual one, right? That's emotional, right? So the ability to sort of understand that there's a part of us, like if you look at Tony Finau, one of the best golfers in the world, he hasn't really won, right? And he gets, inside the top 10 in even major championships. And then, he somehow, messes up a shot or pulls back. At the highest levels, as you can't afford to fuck up, right? And in golf, it could be one bad shot, and next thing you're, someone else is going to win, especially when you come to major championships. And, it begs the question again, given that he came from a poor background and everything, and he didn't, he did it the hard way, on an unconscious level, does he deserve that level of success, that level of happiness, that level of whatever it is that gets the people across that do deserve? And I'm sure the reason I'm bringing this up with you is I'm sure on some level you've paid attention to this, even if you haven't directly addressed it.
I mean, I think on the one side, or even just for us, it's helpful to just maybe define what we mean by when we are talking about emotions and these experiences. So like when I am talking about that, then emotions are, as you know, a very complex subject, right? So you have emotion concepts, which are like, I would prefer not to go into that right now and talk about that. But maybe then you have
maybe we can get you back for the emotional side.
But then you have the possibility to kind of break down what the actual experience of an emotion consists of. So if you divide, one way to divide what a human being can, in theory, experience is you divide it into the senses. So you can divide it into visual, auditory, and somatic experiences. Okay, this is kind of how we work with Mind Size and Unified Mindfulness. And then you further divide that into internal and external experiences. So if you are, if you're talking about an auditory experience, then you can be hearing external sound. You can be hearing my voice, or you can be hearing your mental chatter, an earworm. You can be hearing whatever it is in your mind. Okay, so not imagining something, but it's just internal sound, external sound. The second category, visual experiences, are what you can see with your eyes, whether the eyes are closed or open. You can close your eyes and still see light, kind of, or darkness, for example. And with your eyes open or closed, you can visualize things. So you can see yourself at the beach, or you can see yourself perform in a certain way you want. You can do that intentionally, or it's just happening to you. So those are the visual experiences. So you're seeing things. And then you have somatic experiences, anything that you could feel in the body, whatever that is. And we just, for language sake, to be able to communicate easier, we also divide that into two categories, which would be physical body sensations, like if you're noticing pressure, pain, your breath, temperature, the form of your body, the posture, or emotional body sensations or affect, where you're noticing feelings in the body, but you would not consider them physical in nature, but it's because you're happy, you're feeling something, or you're feeling anxious, you're feeling angry, and so forth. So what we can definitely say is if you're experiencing an emotion, or you're experiencing, you're not deserving something, then it will fall into these 6 categories. And what I would do is I would help you break down and experience in real time what the experience of you're not deserving this actually consists of. Is the experience of I'm not deserving this only something that you feel? It's not actually in your mind. You're only feeling undeserving. And your mind is pretty quiet, or your mind is actually, you're visualizing something that is independent of what you're feeling. Or is the experience of I'm not deserving to win this match actually a combination of auditory thoughts? So you're repeating a word or a phrase or an entire sentence over and over, where you're literally saying to yourself, I'm not deserving this. Why should I win this? This should not happen to me. Other people deserve this much more. So you're hearing that in your mind. You're repeating that intentionally or not. You could be visualizing how you're not deserving. So you should not be experiencing this. So you're seeing certain things, whether that's an image or whether that's more like a moving frame in your mind, or an actual movie in black or white or in color, whatever it might be. And you're feeling it. So the practice, what I would do is to help the person experience that in real time, so they get real insight into that's what it's like to be experiencing this particular emotion concept. And then you will, because of the increased clarity or awareness of what is actually happening to you, it is easier to be equanimous with it, to allow that to be there. And then you are not suppressing it or avoiding it. You're not trying to understand it. It will be a side effect nonetheless, because you're starting to track it in real time. You're starting to notice, oh, that is going through my mind when I feel like I'm not deserving. And that is where the feeling is. Most people, when they say, I'm angry, they cannot tell you more than 3 words about being angry. They have no idea about what angry actually, being angry actually like consists of. It's like, I'm just angry. I'm angry. I don't know. Like, just leave me alone. Rather than, well, are you feeling tension? Do you feel it? So being really clear about what an experience is like makes it significantly easier to be equanimous with it. And that is something that the scientific evidence also is suggesting now, is that if you train those 3 skills in combination, concentration, clarity, and coolness, they improve faster than if you train them in isolation. If you do an isolated concentration exercise, or if you do an isolated exercise where you're trying to be equanimous with something.
I love it, Christian. My assistant's saying we have to wrap up here, but I feel like we could probably go on for another couple hours. So thank you again for participating with me, Christian Straka. Obviously a very talented guy and a good guy, and a mental game coach and an entrepreneur and a former tennis pro. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching See It and Feel It with Dr. Brett, and stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend.